Hello and welcome to Senior Speak New Hampshire on your Concord TV, sponsored by AARP. I am Karen Ulmer-Dorsch, the producer-host of this program. And for the past 6 years, I have been the producer-host and I have brought into your homes many individuals who have educated us on the ways that we can enhance our health, wealth, and self as we age. I have also thanked you for spending 30 minutes of your day with us. And sharing this time with you monthly has been one of the highlights of my 85 years of life. Today will be my final visit with you because my husband and I are moving out of New Hampshire to the Midwest to be with our family. So in 2024, Senior Speak New Hampshire will have a new producer-host, Dan Wise, who will continue to bring this wonderful program to you. Dan is also an active volunteer of AARP, and he has a background in journalism. He is eagerly looking forward to continuing the program's mission and vision, which is also that of AARP. To empower people to choose how they live as they age, and to envision a society in which all people live with dignity and purpose and fulfill their goals and their dreams. Because this is my final visit with you, I have chosen to fulfill one of my goals, and that is to give you just a little smidgen about the life of Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, who is our founder, the founder of AARP. I have long admired this titan of a woman for what she has done for us and continues to really influence every one of our lives today. I did not know about Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, even though I had been a volunteer for AARP, a member of AARP for years. But it wasn't until 2018 when I happened upon this book by Craig Williams that says, Dr. Percy Andrus, the woman who changed America. And I started reading about her. I simply couldn't put the book down. It was so absolutely mesmerizing and astonishing what this woman has done. So when I finished it and I talked to my daughter about her, she said, she's also a member of AARP, and she said, Mom, I don't think very many people know about this woman. And she's an unsung hero. Why don't you do a program on her? So today, I am realizing that goal. And I have asked as my guest, Pam Doobie, who is our Associate Director of Communications in AARP, New Hampshire, to join me in talking about Ethel. Now, it is absolutely impossible for us to complete this story in 30 minutes. We can't do it justice. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Pam some things that she would like to know about Ethel, and she's going to inform me about things that I don't know that are still happening today. And when Matt gives me the 5 to say, you only have 5 minutes left, wherever we are, that's where we're going to stop. Mm-hmm. And I am hoping that what we will achieve is that we will intrigue you so much that you will run right out and go to your local library and try and find a copy of this book. And if you don't find one there, you can always go to the AARP office that is above Gibson's store downtown in Concord, and get one from them because they have some for you. So Pam,
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Hi.
And thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
For talking about this lady that we both love.
She's a firecracker.
She is a firecracker.
I'm excited to be here.
So what are some things that you would like to know?
Well, I guess the first thing I want to know, Karen, you always wonder what someone's backstory is, because no one gets to where they are not having a story.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about what shaped Ethel? Let's just call her Ethel for the rest of the show.
Call her Ethel, because we always call her Ethel. We
Yes.
always say, thank you, Ethel, whenever we're doing anything.
So what shaped her?
Okay. Ethel was shaped by two very strong forces. One, she had incredible parents. She had two incredible parents.
Okay.
And she was shaped by the environment in which she lived. She was born in this is interesting. She was born, we're not sure whether it was in 1841 or in 1894, which 1891 or 1894,
Okay.
which are, her tombstone says 1894. But Walker, when he was researching for her book, found out that she really was born in 1891.
Well, I mean, a lot of records aren't around anymore, so it might be a little ambiguous when it actually happened.
At any rate, she was born in San Francisco. And San Francisco at that time was really coming into also its own, but it was not really San Francisco that influenced her. It was her parents' values.
Okay.
And they valued education. And at that time,
Definitely.
girls frequently did not finish but 8th grade. They went to 8th grade, or that was it. They didn't do any more. Her parents were determined. She had a sister also, an older sister, Maud. And her parents were determined that their daughters were going to have education.
I love that.
And they were going to have it as far as they could go. And they were also people who her father, George, believed sincerely in giving back to the community.
Okay.
So with those two...
I can already see how AARP comes into play.
Right. So when she was growing up, of course, that was happening to her. Then her parents in 1909 moved to Chicago.
Crazy place in 1909.
If you have read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle.
Oh, I have. And there are images from that book that will never leave my mind.
Right. And the interesting thing is that there was the jungle. There were those people. But it was also the progressive era. And that meant that coupled with all of these immigrants that were coming into America at this time in Chicago, speaking all kinds of languages, not knowing anything about our culture or our language.
Yes.
On the other side were all of these brilliant people like John Dewey, who was the father of manual arts or learning, hands-on doing.
Okay.
Ernest Hemingway lived a few doors down from her.
Wow.
Ray Kroc, which most people know is the founder of McDonald's, was right there at that time also. And Jane Addams. Now, some people may not know, but Jane Addams was one of the beginning. She was very wealthy, and she lived in Chicago at a time when all of this was going on. This was a dirty, dusty, ugly place.
Yeah.
Because there were all these people who spoke all different languages. There was really no community among them, but they were there.
Yeah.
And Jane and other wealthy women in Chicago at that time said, if we're going to bring about a city that's going to survive and move forward, it's going to be us that's going to have to do it, because nobody else is. So Addams opened a settlement house. Now, settlement houses in those days were houses that, I don't know, I got the feeling that they were in other cities possible, but she apparently began one of the first that was called Hull House.
Okay.
And she, as a wealthy woman, moved into Hull House and brought in all the immigrant women and men and taught them skills on how to manage becoming American.
Okay.
Ethel, at this time, was of high school age.
Yeah, I was thinking she must be around 17, 18
Right.
years old. Yeah.
And she started her education in the Lewis Institute. It was a first junior college in America.
Okay. Oh.
And it was started not by John Lewis, but by another man years earlier, who offered, I think it was he, who offered free night classes to adults.
Okay.
Or actually, he offered free classes, period, to anybody who went to that school. So Ethel taught, when she graduated from there, she was encouraged to teach, and so she became a member of the faculty. And as a member of the faculty, she also was fascinated with drama, and she happened to take a troupe to Hull House to perform, and that introduced her to Jane Addams, and she became intrigued with what Addams was doing with women there, and started her life of volunteering. In the afternoons, after she quit teaching, she would go to Hull House and volunteer. And her comment was that that was where she learned that to honor inclusion and diversity.
And
Because
this is what, 1920,
19, I think I've got
This is
that
early
somewhere in
on.
here. Yeah, well,
It's a visionary approach at that time.
exactly. It was. It was.
Yes.
And so in 1909, so she was 18 years old about this time, okay?
Yep.
And so finally, in 1909, Chicago during this time also had the World's Fair.
Yes, a very famous World's
It had the
Fair.
very famous World's Fair.
Yeah.
And Ethel, and that's another one of the people who really influenced her, because all of the leading, or the big architects created everything that was happening.
The White City.
The White City.
Yes.
And Daniel Burnham was the main architect of that fair. And he made the quote, "Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood." That was the first, well, actually, it wasn't the first connection I had, but it was the first time I realized I had a connection with Ethel, because when I became the first female head of the Division of Humanities at Tilton School, above my desk was Daniel Burnham's quote.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It was, and when I read that, I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." But that was exactly, and she made she lived that her entire life. She made no little plans.
Right.
She was always big, big, big,
Yep.
and succeeded. Okay, so she was very much a very strong educator as a teacher in Chicago. But in 1909, her father and her health suffered. And so they moved back to California, but this time to Southern California in Los Angeles, around Los Angeles. And so Ethel sort of had to begin all over again. And again, this was a situation where she could have stayed and continued to teach in Chicago, where she was doing very well, but she put family above career.
Yeah.
And she went back with her family to help, with her dad, to help, resuscitate his health and so on and so forth. Her health got better. His began to decline at that time, and he eventually goes blind. But Ethel has to start all over, and she does. She gets a job. At that time, Los Angeles and the cities around, the big cities around, were beginning to realize that the high schools that were existing in those days were not serving certain people. High schools in those days were simply a training ground for people who wanted to go on to college.
Got it.
Well, you have these immigrants that came from countries all over the world where education wasn't the big thing to them.
Right.
And so Greek and Latin and all of these things that were being taught in the high school had no, it just didn't fit. And so schools were beginning to realize that they were going to have to change. And John Dewey at this time has begun the idea of not listening to rote teaching, but hands-on learning, learning by doing. Okay. So the first school that hired Ethel was a school that was called Manual Arts. And very few men or anybody wanted to go to this school because they weren't interested in the manual arts. They were trained to teach the classics, you know, so they didn't want it.
Yeah, it wasn't looked at as the upper echelon of
No, it wasn't.
careers.
No,
Okay.
it wasn't.
Yes.
But Ethel, because of the background that she had had and because of what Hull House had taught her, said, sure, I'll do this. Yep. And so she made such an impression on people by being the head an English teacher in manual arts, okay, that eventually another high school opened up in Los Angeles that was called Lincoln Heights, and it was a school that was centered in a community of immigrants. The community, I say community lightly because it wasn't a community, it was where all immigrants lived, right, but they didn't consider it a community. And Lincoln Heights was set up high on a hill, and it was totally isolated from the people who lived in the community. So they, you know, the kids went there, but the students also found everything that was going on there totally nothing they cared for. So there was high truancy and high delinquency. And the early years, so Ethel got hired to be an English teacher there. And within mid-year, she became the vice principal for the girls. Okay, so she became, she was so good at what she was doing that by mid-year, they make her principal. Okay? Now,
which is unheard of for women.
Exactly.
At that time.
She was the first female principal of a large urban high school in California.
Wow.
Yeah.
She's in the right place at the right time, but she's also seizing an opportunity when she sees it.
And the minute she sees it, she recognizes that no man wanted this job because the kids were in jail more than they were at school. Mm. And she saw immediately that it was because there wasn't anything in the school that fascinated the students. There wasn't anything there for them. So the first thing she did as principal, she had a huge sign that said opportunity put across the gate that every kid had to walk into of that school. Anybody who entered the school. Mm-hmm. Here was this sign, opportunity. And
I'm going to stop you for 1 second. Yeah. Opportunity is something we talk about all the time at AARP now. Opportunities for employment, opportunities to pursue what, you know, makes you happy, the opportunity to choose how you age. Right. So it's amazing that back then,
she knew.
She knew, yeah.
And the other thing in the back of her mind was she decided she wanted to make it an opportunity school, period. So the way she did this was fascinating because she did it through, there was no school spirit because the kids didn't have anything to be proud about.
Yeah.
She began with athletics, drama, music.
Okay.
And later, she started community nights to get the parents, because she got the kids all involved. They suddenly started wanting to come to school and not be anywhere else.
Okay.
And but she still had to bring the parents there.
Yeah.
So she created what was called opportunity nights. And for 2 months, two nights out of each month, she would bring in speakers, and they would have sing-alongs also.
Huh.
And eventually, I think it was like 6 months after she started there, the community down below, which was called East Los Angeles, decided they were going to be called Lincoln Heights. And
Wow.
they became a community of people.
She built the community. Oh my goodness.
She built the community.
Oh my goodness, that's
Okay?
amazing.
Isn't that just fabulous?
Yes.
And some of her students that she had out of this group of immigrants, because I think there were like, I forgot how many, but there were 24 different languages or something like that was being spoken in that community.
Wow.
Plus, of course, they were learning English. And I'm sure that the children were teaching their parents English, because that's frequently what happened.
How smart for her to, focus on sports and drama and music to bring people together who weren't sharing a common language.
Exactly.
It was all something they could do together.
That's right.
Oh, that's so smart.
That's right.
Yeah.
She was just, she incorporated what she had learned in Hull House. And the other thing that was so important, she said, we must bring these people into our culture without their losing the pride of their own cultures. Mm-hmm. So she wanted them to grow, but she didn't want them to leave behind what they had to offer. Mm-hmm. And it was fabulous. 2 of her students of great fame, Robert Preston, who was the Music Man guy.
Yes.
Yes. And Robert Young, who is Father Knows Best.
Yeah.
Okay, a great program.
Yeah.
And then she also had Jose Limon, who was a creator of modern dance.
Okay.
So she had absolutely fabulous students because she let them be what they could be. She did not force anybody. She didn't want these middle class students, because they were from the working class, mm-hmm. and she didn't want them to feel that they couldn't be doctors, lawyers, or whatever they wanted to be, but
opportunity. Yeah,
that's what she wanted them to see. There was
yes.
the opportunity. So she continued to do this for 28 years. She was principal for 28 years of this high school.
Amazing. Imagine all of the students whose lives she impacted and their families' lives. And the lives she's still impacting now. It's
exactly.
What a story.
And Robert Preston, upon her death, Robert Preston sent a notice saying, we walk through that gate every day, and little did we know that opportunity had red hair, because Ethel had red hair.
I love it. Well, the AARP color is still red, so
that's right.
Maybe it goes back to that.
That's absolutely right. So that brings us to, she retired as, how did she retire, or why did she retire?
Yeah.
Because at 28 years old, she was still very young, fairly young. I think maybe in her 60s. I'm not sure. I'm not a math teacher. I was a language teacher.
Yep. So she retired somewhere around 60 years old after the 28-year career as principal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And she did that because her father had died a few years before. Mm-hmm. Her mother's health had been failing. And the nurse who was taking care of her mother said to her, you need to anticipate that your mother is just going to become an invalid.
Mm. Okay.
Ethel's driving to school the day the woman says that, and she thinks, I can't let that happen. And that day she resigned. Well, everybody said, you can't resign. And she said, family first.
Yeah.
I'm resigning. But just prior to resigning, she had organized, I think she actually organized yes, she was co-founder of the Secondary Principles of California.
Okay, so
the
an
Association of
association.
Secondary Principals of California. Well, she was used to, of course, changing policy and all of that kind of stuff. What do they give her as a job but welfare? Well, at that time, retired teachers in California had a pension of $40 a month. On that, they were to exist.
Right.
They asked her to ferret out the retired teachers of California to make sure that they were not living in poverty, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think I
Okay?
know what story you're coming to
Here
now.
comes the story of the chicken coop that changed America
Right.
in many ways.
Yes.
Okay? You want to tell the story?
Well, my understanding is that she was contacted by a member of the community who had some concerns about a neighbor who was in need of teeth and some other things. And so on a rainy Saturday morning, Ethel drove out to this woman to check on her and found her living in a chicken coop because that was all she could afford to live in. She was living in a chicken coop.
Right.
After working as a teacher very hard her entire life, this is where she was at. And Ethel was appalled.
Yes, she
that
was.
There was nothing in place that this woman could fall back on.
That's right. And just to shift that story a little bit, she did go to this, she was told to check on this woman. She goes to the house, she knocks, and the person that comes to the door says, no, nobody's home. So she goes next door. And she tells the next door guy that she's looking for, and she names this person.
Yes.
And he says, nobody by that name lives there. And so she starts to walk away, and he said, oh, maybe you're talking about the woman that lives out back.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's how she found out about this woman.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so this was in the back of her mind. But shortly after that is when her mother becomes ill and needs her, and she decides she's going to retire. And she's going to nurse her mother back to health. And indeed, she does. She nurses Lucretia back to health. And when she does that, I need to look at where...
Well, you're looking up what you need to
Yeah,
find.
you do that.
This is making me think of work I was just doing today. She went home to be a caregiver for her mom. And caregiving is one of the cornerstones of issues that we have been on top of for a long time and will figure very prominently in AARP's work during the 2024 election cycle. We have 168,000 caregivers in the state. And so what Ethel started as caregiving all that time ago is still alive and strong at AARP.
Yes, and her mother's comment was, old age, Ethel, needs you to care for them as you cared for youth. But it needs something more. It needs the desire to live, to continue planning and striving, hopefully to keep working at something worthwhile.
Yeah.
And when at last old age becomes dependent, it needs someone who will still care. And if there is no one to care, there should be community care, which can make it easy to help those who cannot help themselves.
Wow.
To keep their dignity and their self-respect.
Yeah.
And people, we've come we have only touched a little tiny bit of what this woman has done in her life. She had about 5 different careers because of her taking advantage of every opportunity that came along for her. So I hope that this has given you enough of an appetite to go and find out more about this fabulous woman, because her story really needs to be told, and you need to be aware of how she's still influencing you today, because she started group health insurance. She was group travel, the kind of nursing homes that we have today, or the kinds of continual
Assisted living.
assisted living. And when I was a little girl, the kinds of homes that existed at that time were almshouses. I had aunts. I had 2 aunts that took care of the people. And so I know what they were like, and they were horrible.
I feel like you're leaving everyone at a cliffhanger just when it's about to get good.
I hope. That's the intent, because I really want you to read this book. And until then, thank you, Concord TV, Matt, Josh, Emmett, Mike, Jim, everybody, and everyone who has always watched this. Be good, do good, be one.